Thank you so much for having me here. I'm going to read part of a story. That's a story about my mother, who was the singularly most intelligent and uncompromisingly honest and courageous one I've ever known. And she refused the communist. She refused to join the communist party in a communist country, which was not a wise decision, and it eventually cost her life, and cost obviously me a lot of grief too. Back then, I was very mad at her for that. Today, I'm very proud of her for that. But it's, we understand more as time passes, right? So this is part of her story. My mother was dying. Lying in bed, I closed my eyes for a moment. Perhaps by shutting the world out, my thoughts would go away, death would go away. The faucet was dripping in the bathroom. Anyu, that's mother in Hungarian, Anyu hadn't shut it off right when she had gone to get some water. She was constantly thirsty and got up every night 3, 4 times, bringing our blue 2-liter pitcher with her to the sink. She slept naked, and because I had stopped sleeping, I could see her swollen body clearly as she advanced slowly, every step a challenge. I watched her thick thighs, her protruding belly, the fallen shoulders, her large, helpless breasts. She had lost much of her hair, and the moonlight shined through it now as it shined through the window as she passed on her way. I wept for her hair, her quick-footed walk, her abundant, beautiful self. Cynthia, my sister, steered next to me, and her small fingers clasped my hand. Only 6 years old, she could sleep through anything, even her mother dying. A low, wet cough burst out of my mother's lungs. It started a new fit, during which her breathing became increasingly rapid between coughs. The mucus she coughed up mixed with her saliva, and as she tried to breathe, the mixture got sucked into her lungs, elevating the urgency in her efforts. Only the coughs came in quick successions of 7s and 8s, followed by one shallow, inadequate breath. There was a mindless, frantic quality to the process, and my mother was never mindless. This lack of thought frightened me almost as much as her drowning in spit. I decided I would try breathing for her. Like a Buddhist monk, I freed my mind of anything but Anyu and my breathing, so the two would become one. I closed my eyes, and I imagined the rest of her apartment. 2 small rooms, the larger of which was occupied by my mother's handmade bed and my sleeping mother. The smaller one, where I now lay, belonged to my sister and me. It was where we did homework and played. Our bedroom was separated from the living room by a blue curtain with tiny marigolds in orange and white. I saw Anyu's bronze-stained solid pine bed, the big brass screws in all 4 of its stumpy legs. Anyu built everything we had now. 2 beds, a dresser, a dinner table, and a desk, 6 square stools, a bookshelf, a small kitchen table. Some of the furniture she stained dark brown like chocolate, some golden like honey. Her bed, the one she was now dying in, was as dark as coffee. My stomach growled. We hadn't eaten for 3 days. I remember our last meal of boiled potatoes, salted and buttered, with longing. Cynthia seemed oblivious to what was happening to Anyu. She spent her days complacent, serene, even happy, drawing the Mad Hatter next to me while I did my homework. She only fretted when I let her to go to school. Once she snuck into my classroom in November during the 10 minutes recess, hiding herself in the coat cabinet. My teacher, Miss Sapashi, found her because she sneezed. Miss Sapashi took in my sister's bony arms and her soiled summer dress, and she turned on her heels and walked out of the classroom very fast. Cynthia was allowed to finish the day sitting next to me, holding a gold-tipped pencil like a treasure, and I pretended to write about the coronation of our first king, Stephen I, who was crowned on December 25th of 1000, while contemplating the 30-minute walk Cynthia had taken to get to my school, imagining all the places where she could have disappeared. I had to get back to Anyu's breathing. It was so difficult to concentrate hungry, but I refused to quit. I pictured my mother's bed again. Coffee brown with no headboard, fitted with a thin mattress. Sheet and pillow stained with grease, the cover a synthetic sleeping bag reeking of spilled beer and sweat. At the end of the bed there was a typewriter, and next to the bed an old cast iron piano chair. The piano was sold long ago, but books piled high. The poems of Dezső Kosztolányi, The Door by Magda Szabó, Dostoevsky, Hemingway, Camus. The name Camus was written on a spine in bright red letters, and this unsettled me. Surrounding the bed, there were full ashtrays and empty bottles scattered everywhere. Palinka and beer bottles mostly. Wine was too expensive. I broke up the amber and green glass of kőbányai bottles sometimes to build a small castle out of the fragments for Cynthia or to make the wind chime to sell during summer. The space above the bed was lined with bookshelves, the book crammed in without any order, but the books were loved. My mother loved them. And when she wasn't writing or drinking, she read. The wall had been white but turned creamy yellow like butter from smoke. And the crux from my mother were a line written on the wall from Attila József, Anyu's favorite poet. As it flows straight from my heart, troubled, wise, and great was the Danube. Every time she opened her eyes in bed, that's what she saw. Finally, I drifted back to Anyu, the body. Would she still in death be called my mother? A body that wasn't my mother because a body couldn't be called my mother, but also couldn't be called a body because she was not any body but my mother's body. Which was wrong again because dead, she couldn't possess anything, least of all a body. I envisioned her lying on the bed with one arm covering her face. She always slept like this, as if something was bothering her eyes. I took in the image of her graying hair coating the pillow like a curtain beyond which I could never see. Her once narrow wrist was now buried beneath flesh, although I refused to acknowledge her publicly as fat and got into a fistfight once at school because someone called her that. I'm not sure why I hated the idea of my mother being fat, except that becoming fat made me think of her drinking, and her drinking made me think of her smoking, and her smoking made me think of her dying. Underneath the wrist, there was her nose, still beautiful, at least beautiful to me because her nose hadn't changed, and I saw strength in that nose I could, if only for moments, hold on to. My mother's cheeks had become streaked with broken blood vessels, her pores clogged with dirt. I sometimes replaced her evening image above the typewriter with a clean-shaven man bathed in sunlight and felt very reassured by that image. Maybe I longed for a father as much as for my mother, and if so, did Anya know this? Is that why she was always so angry? My body twitched and I turned to Cynthia, worried about waking her. I took a deep breath and tried one last time to will my mother's breathing to fuse with mine. I imagined her chest rising as she breathed in. I counted the seconds between her inhaling. I adjusted my own breathing to the rhythm of hers. But I was failing. My breath and my mother would not become one. Nothing remained in our apartment, no books, papers, bottles, no piano chair and honey brown handmade furniture, no writings on the wall, no glass castle and wind chime, only my mother and her breathing. I lay paralyzed next to my sister, who was blissfully asleep, unaware of our mother's wheezing and gurgling, the sounds she made every 5 seconds when she took a breath. I knew with absolute certainty that Anya was going to die. And one of these nights when I counted to 5, I would hear nothing. And then, what would I tell Cynthia when she woke up? What would we do? Thank you very much.